Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's night ending bonus. Before we jump into tonight's very terrifying encounters, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this night-ending bonus, shall we? Sorry for the delay. I sat at work today on my laptop sorting these out for you, so hopefully you should have them in a couple of hours with photos of each encounter. Right for the first one. Number 1. I've worked away my whole life, and I got sick and tired of stopping in hotels, so I bought a Caravan from my dad. And wherever I was working, I would park it up there for however long the job was. I was stopping at Mark's farm, which has its own caravan park on it. So, I've been stopping here for years on and off with nothing happening out of the ordinary. Anyway, it was June of 2017, and I had just started a new job working on the M50 parapet renewals. So I thought I could travel to the caravan after work. So I rang Mark and asked him to bring it out of storage area and that I would be stopping in for a while. When I arrived there about 2 hours later, I set it up, then went in for a shower and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up around 4:30, went to work, finished work, and traveled back to the caravan. Now, there's an Indian takeaway about a mile away from the caravan site, so I went to pick up some curry and had a pint of beer while I was waiting for my food. Set off to the caravan and ate my curry, also had a couple of bottles of beer. I must have fallen asleep and woke up to something scratching on the side of the caravan. And I banged my hand on the floor. It stopped and I realized I hadn't had a shower, so I closed the window and went to the shower. While in the shower, I heard the floor creaking. And I knew that I was the only person on the site at the time, so I finished off in the shower, dried myself, unlocked the shower door, and had a look, and nobody was about anywhere. So I headed off back to the caravan when I saw it running across the field. And I thought, what the fuck? I could see it in the light off of the moon. So I quietly thought to myself to get back to the caravan and lock the door. I didn't sleep much that night and went to work in the morning, used one of the lab vans, and went to move the caravan closer to the job. I now know, after listening to yourself and Victor, that it was a Dogman, as it had a tail. See the photo of the location. Number 2. Working at Clayton West Salvage Treatment Works, 6 miles from home, I would go into work for 6 a.m., get the paperwork done and any briefings ready for the lads, and then have a coffee and some cigarettes at the top of the office stairs on the landing. I would lean on the handrail while drinking my coffee and smoking. It was really quiet this morning. All I could hear were the cars passing on the main road, which was about 100 yards away. By the way, there are trees down 2 sides of the stream, and on the other two sides are open fields with a farm at the top of a hill. Anyway, I'm minding my own business, or in the world of my own, when something growled at me and vibrated my chest. I didn't move a muscle, only my head as I looked around to see what it was. And I couldn't see anything at all. The only place I didn't look was behind me on the roof of the cabins, which would have been about 20 feet high. Then one of the lads came in, and I asked him if he had heard a growl. He said he hadn't heard anything. So when I got home, I started to search the internet for animals in the United Kingdom that would do this. Now, because of the smell of the sewage works, myself and a couple of the other lads would go about a mile up the road to a Layby to eat our sandwiches and get coffee, and sit in the cars and van. This is where I saw my first dogman or dog lady. Not too sure what the sex is, but I understand why people in the UK say they've seen large cats in the countryside. Jeff, I was reading the paper while I sat there, and something moving in the field next to me. It was brown in color. You know how a cat creeps up on something when it's hunting or trying to catch a bird? It was doing that, creeping along the floor. Its coat was either wet or very greasy. It had a tail, and the fur was like it all bushed up, if that's the way to say it. Its ears were pointed up, and it had a dog's head. I didn't see its eyes. I would have probably filled my pants. See the second photo, pal. I'll have to talk you through these and explain what's what. Number 3, I finished in Clayton West and started another job at a place called Earton on the East Coast by Scarborough. I set off from home at about 3:30 and jumped onto the M1 north, and I would turn off the M1 onto the A64 to head to York. As I came off the M1 onto the slip road and followed it around onto A64, I followed the round towards A64, and halfway around, just after I came out of the passing under the M1, this big black thing was walking across the road like it didn't have a care in the world. And I went from the right-hand lane over to the left-hand lane. And as I was passing it, this thing gave me a right dirty look, like as if to say, "What the fuck are you doing here?" It was much bigger than the brown one I had seen, really bulky, and not moving very fast at all. Part 4. Still Earton job. This was much better job because it didn't stink. It was a clean water site. Anyway, we all worked there for months and nothing happened until water sampling went 24/7. One of my friends was on night shift, and on the Friday morning when I got up into work, he said that he's not working nights as something had growled at him. I asked him what he saw, and he said that he hadn't seen anything. He just carried on walking around to the next point and didn't go back around to the back end of the site again. So I waited until my boss came in and told him what had happened, and I laughed when his reply was, "Oh, it's probably a fox." I thought, I don't think so, considering this guy is 6'6" and built like a brick shithouse. You can guess what was coming. I had to do the night shift as well as my day shift, and then 2-hour drive home afterward. I'm done the sampling every hour on the hour and walked right around the site. And I would get a free 20 minutes every hour, so I would go up onto the top of the gas tanks. These are about 40 feet high, and I could see into the fields. We're about 150 yards outside of the boundary. Anyway, nothing happened that night. I went home, then worked the following week, and finished early Friday morning that week. I gave my key card to the gate to one of the lads so they could access the job at the weekend, and I said I would get it back on Monday morning. Anyway, left home about 3:30, and I was outside of the access gate just after 5:30, so I sat in my car playing games on my phone. And for some strange reason, I looked up at the gates at the far side, the back end of the site. And this black thing was stood up against the gates, staring at me. I sat in my car, and as soon as it realized that I had seen it, it sort of stood back like in shock. And kind of sidestepped way faster than we could behind the MCC. I kept looking over, and it must have jumped over the fencing, which is about 10 feet high. And the next thing is it waved its arm out from behind the MCC as to call me over. Jeff, please ask Victor if this bit, when it waved its arm, I could see its fur on its arm and how muscular its arm was. And that its palm, or paw, not sure what to call it, was quite long and pale in color compared to its jet black fur. It must have stood with its back to the MCC, as the way it waved its arm. I'm not sure if they can twist their wrists like we do. Part 5. Still in Erin, just a short this one. I worked from 6 to 1800, plus the extra ones to get sent my way. Anyway, we were locking up. All the lads had left, and there were 3 of us left on site. Whoever drives out the gate first pulls over and waits for the gate to close. It's just what's got to be done. One of the lads pulls over and going to drop one of the other lads off in Scarborough and pick him up in the morning. So we go out to the gate and turn left, then go straight for 80 yards, then 45-degree turn left, 45-degree turn right. As we turned the 45-degree turn right, it goes over a small beck or river, and there is a 4-foot hedge on the left-hand side of the road. We both see this thing, trying to get out of the pickup's lights, running behind a hedge. Now the hedge is 4 feet tall on the roadside. I know this because I got a measuring tape out in the morning, and then I went with a torch and measured the back side of it. And it's also 4 feet down from the road level. And we both say this was crouching over, and it's still about 18 inches above the hedge. So we estimate it to be 9.5 feet tall, black with gray around, I would say neck area. But I didn't have a neck sounds mad, but I don't know what to call it. Like the head had just been plunked on top of its shoulders. I stopped in Scarborough Monday through Friday, so with that, I can't say any more. I went to a pub and had a few beers. Part 6. Not too far from Earton is another little job. They had a crane in to lift some of the new kiosks into place, and it started leaking hydraulic oil everywhere. My phone rang to see if I could spare a few lads, and the pickup to go to Caton to clean it up. As we didn't have any spare lads, I went down with one other lad who offered me help, and we cleaned up the spill, and the crane was fixed and lifted the kiosk into place. And they de-rigged the crane, and we were left to fence off the job, a 10-minute job, and go back while doing the fence panels up. This other lad who was with me said that something dark had run past just in the field. I pointed whereabout, but I couldn't see anything. It was too dark. So we went back to Earton. Part 7. This is just a little one. I had to go home one night to get a spare wheel and a couple of tires for my car, due to the, I'll just say, puncture. And with the weather getting cold, a good time for me to put a couple of my winter tires on the same time. Same old, I left home at 3:30 and set off the normal way. And because I was in the pickup and they don't like you to smoke in it, I stopped at a place called Shearburn for a smoke. I parked on the left in a small lay-by by a car sales and got out, lit a cigarette. I was leaning on the tailgate, and I was smoking. 3 howls, one after another, from across the road. They were so close, I threw the cigarette away and jumped into the pickup, locking the doors, and drove off. Number 8. Last one, pal. We had just lost my dad, and I was down in Wales, stopping at my sister's. In the evening, I would, once it's dark, sit in the back garden and drink JD and Coke with ice, and sit watching the satellites go by, and also watching the ISS, or International Space Station, go past every so often. Anyway, I was sat with my back against her wall or fence and just drinking away. And no, I wasn't that pissed. And I heard a noise behind me, so I got up and looked at the gap where the cats come and go from the field. And I was looking eye to eye with I don't know what. It was like a humanish face, but not. I think its skin was grayish brown. I couldn't see ear. Short hair, it shot off. I was halfway up anyway, and by the time I looked over the fence, it was gone. I did hear the gate that is there, a small dink, as it must have jumped over it. But that's all I can tell you about that. But it's messed my head up more than the furry thing has done. See what you can make of them, pal. Sorry for the spelling. If you need any more info, just drop me an email. You guys have a friggin' great show. Now, I believe you pronounce his name Garth or Gareth, but thank you for sending me your encounters. What I'm going to do is, if you know how to use my community post, go over there. There's just an icon that says community. Click on it. I'm going to put the photos that he sent with each corresponding story, 1 through 8, in a row, so you guys can check those photos out of what he sent me. Just going to go clockwise, I guess, with the photos. So number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But yeah, so if you're looking for those photos, they are in the community section, which is part of the YouTube channel. Not very hard to find. All right, moving on. Today's second encounter comes to us from Vermont. November 1984, between 12 a.m. and 1, the night my niece was born, there was a snowstorm. My brother-in-law had a custom car and wanted to go home to Milton to switch it to his older one because of the snow. My husband, brother-in-law, nephew 3 years old, and myself drove from Milton. We were headed to my house in Winooski. We got as far as Gloucester. When the snow got really bad and the car slid into a ditch, my nephew began to cry and scream. We flagged down a truck to bring me and my nephew to my house and call a tow truck. I left my husband and brother-in-law in Gloucester. My husband said while they were waiting, they started to hear noises in the woods, like trees breaking. Then they heard something that was coming in their direction, but it was stomping on 2 legs. They could hear the breaking trees coming closer. My husband is a hunter, and he said that you can tell it was walking on 2 legs. They backed away from the side of the road to the other. They couldn't run because the road was too slippery and they had sneakers on. Meanwhile, it was getting closer. It was starting to part the trees when the tow truck came. They heard it run back into the woods, breaking everything in its path. My husband was scared. They both told me what had happened. I halfway believed them. The next day I drove through the same place and looked around as I drove. I saw fields and woods and thought that it looked too peaceful, and really thought they were nuts. I had to pick up my husband in Milton. I had my daughters with me, 10 and 13. I was pregnant at the time. Anyway, I got to Milton. Later that night, we were heading back to Winooski. Well, wouldn't you know it, it started to snow really hard like the night before, and it was about 12 a.m. We started to go through the same spot as the night before, and I started to tell my husband about me looking around earlier, and that there was nothing, when there it was. It just crossed the road and started to go up a hill. It was staring at us with one foot on the wire fence, holding the wire down with its arm, just staring at us. It wasn't brown, but white, with yellow dirty streaks, and its eyes, oh, how they scared me. They were reflecting yellow, amber color, with a yellow of caution lights. Just huge, at least 10 feet tall, arms very long. Its fur was long on its face, and only flesh part that didn't have fur was its eyes and upper cheeks. My husband started to slow down to get a better look. That's when I freaked out and started to hit my husband. Because I was so scared my girls were screaming, so we kept going. I just kept on thinking about its eyes and was so afraid. Since we saw it, I can't help but wonder if they're like jackrabbits, brown during the summer and white in the winter. Because of the snowstorm each night, it made it impossible to find any tracks. Today's third encounter. We'll stay in Vermont. We're going to Bennington for this one. I'm a Civil War reenactor, and I was participating in an event on the grounds of Hidland Mansion, which is Robert Todd Lincoln's home near Manchester, Vermont. We were camped on the front lawn of the mansion, which is bordered on two sides of woods. The whole area is somewhat off the beaten path. The house is probably a half a mile from the main road. In the middle of Friday night, I'd guess 1 or 2, I woke up and was walking to the building beside the main house to use the restroom. And as I left my tent, I was walking toward the restroom, I heard footsteps walking near me in the woods. They seemed to follow as I went to the restroom, and as I walked back from the restroom, they walked back with me to my tent. The whole time walking back, I had a really uneasy feeling like I was being watched. The next night, Saturday, I was sitting around the campfire, just about 11 p.m., talking, and we heard footsteps coming from the woods, which we were right next to, but the noises were coming from inside of the woods. We shined a flashlight on the area that the noises was coming from, and it stopped immediately. And as we turned the flashlight off, we heard the noises again, heading away from us. Both times that I heard the noise, it sounded like a large animal, and from what I could hear, it sounded like a large animal walking on 2 legs. While there are other groups at the event, I don't think that it was another person, as there were trails that were clear that they could have used. Also, of course, it was so late at night, and there was no light from a lantern or a flashlight. Today's fourth encounter. The sighting was on August 6th of 2019 at around 10:15 in the morning at our Vermont summer cabin. I was 67, retired RN and former private pilot with excellent vision, 2015. So I was not mistaken. It was not a bear. We have had bear here by the deck, so I know what bear looked like, standing up to reach the feeder. It was a sunny day. My small Chihuahua mix was out front in her cage. She was barking, so I walked to the front deck and looked toward the dirt road where she was looking. We sit back approximately 125 feet from the road. I saw a very black humanoid shape walking on 2 legs go past our driveway. It was half bent over and half straightened up. It had long arms swinging. The head was turned away and appeared to have a very short neck with a roundish head from the angle. I said to myself, that looks like a chimp. I watched it for approximately 12 seconds until it disappeared behind trees going east on the road. There are spots that I can see through the trees to the neighbor's drive, so I was looking for it to either go up the drive or continue on the road. When it didn't, I walked out to the end of the drive approximately 200 feet. There was nothing on the road for some distance. Later in the day, I went out to the area with my small dog. She refused to even walk and was trembling. This is the same dog that also went through the screen door to attack the bear by our feeder a few weeks ago. I noticed an area of bent weeds that would have been where the creature had exited our woods, going into a small ditch, then back up to get onto the road before walking past our driveway. On the roadside, in the direction I saw it going, there were 3 bare-foot heel impressions with faint toe marks, 12 inches long. The area was dry with fine gravel, so not a clear print. The week before, I heard twigs snapping and weeds moving along my fenced garden. This approximately 40 feet from the front porch where I often sit. The dog barked, the noises stopped, and started again. So I fired off my air horn, which I always have near after the encounter with a large coy wolf. The cabins sit about 100 feet above the North Branch Lamoille River. There are many snowmobile and ATV trails, plus the long trail is only a fifth of a mile. It's very wooded and remote. A few homes and camps are on our road. Really quick, before we head into the final encounter of tonight, I'm wondering if there was a misidentification with the encounter, the large coy wolf. The second I read this encounter, I instantly thought that large coy wolf was possibly the Dogman. Just a little food for thought. Kick it around for a little bit. Moving on. I put together a mountain bike trip with my cousin for the weekend in central Vermont, near the town of Plymouth in Calvin Coolidge Forest. We decided to lean to a shelter called Tinkerbrook, just on the outskirts of the forest near the backside of Killington. One reason for this location was because of the steep topography of the area offered for mountain biking. Also, not too many people visit this shelter according to the rangers I talked to before, due to a hike and lack of 4x4 access. The place offers nothing more than a view of a steep forested ravine. The shelter's right on the edge of this ravine as well. We traveled up Shrewsbury Road, which intersects with Route 100 south of Plymouth, then heads west almost straight up the nearest mountain in a series of switchbacks. We then parked our vehicle on the bend in the road where the Tinkerbox shelter is. The trail road is heavily blocked off by boulders and easily missed. We packed up the bikes and headed down the old trail road to the shelter. The shelter is about 3/4 of a mile of forest road we had parked on. We set up camp for the night in the shelter and looked around. The place offered no trails to ride on, and the ravine was so steep that you needed to climb out using the roots of the trees. The place was completely isolated. We headed off to bed around 9 and left the campfire going near the opening of the shelter. A few hours later, midnight, my cousin woke me up, saying he was hearing and feeling knocks on the shelter. I told him, "Go back to bed." Then I heard and felt the noises myself. The sounds were like something big pushing against the shelter. I thought it could have been a moose or a bear and decided to go and check it out. I took a flashlight with me and went to the back within a minute of hearing the noise. There was nothing there. This continued a few more times during the night until maybe 3 in the morning. I felt the bumping sounds near my side of the shelter on occasion. We did not get much night's sleep. At one point, I even pulled all the firewood close to the opening to keep a large fire going. In the morning, we looked for any damage to the shelter and found nothing. We also looked around for any signs on the ground. Obviously, we found nothing. We decided not to stay another night and headed home. All right, guys, a set of very chilling experiences from a subscriber out of the United Kingdom. Also, that last encounter, I've been in that kind of shelter before, and I'm sure many of you guys have too. Actually, in the Adirondacks, on certain trails, there are lean-tos that were built in like the 50s. Fairly well maintained, but very well built. And I've had some pretty intense nights sleeping in lean-tos growing up, especially while I was an explorer, which is, instead of Boy Scouts, Explorer Scouts. I remember one night we had a fire. Our fire pit was just probably 15 feet from the entrance of the lean-to. And a couple of my friends, fellow explorers, had woken up and they said they had seen something outside of the line of light that the fire was producing. But I've never had anything knock on a camping shelter that I've ever been in, thank God. Wow. That'd be just absolutely frightening. Guys, thank you for supporting the channel. Your support is what makes this channel special and what continues for it to grow and go. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real, they're out there, they're dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless you all.